I'm very proud to introduce everybody Meri Maroutian this morning. We're very lucky to have Meri with us in this session on systematic bias in English language teaching. Meri, we joked there, she's a popular international speaker. So I was surprised when you said yes, as you were surprised when I invited you. So thank you for coming. And Meri's a founding member of the Non-Native Speaker, which is a teacher training organization, very easy to find online, and the names there, offering training, development and support for non-native and multilingual teachers. Meri is a Delta qualified. We talked about CELTAs in the last session. Delta is even the next one up if you really want to go into your teacher training. That's Diploma in English Language Teaching to Adults from Cambridge. But she's a teacher and teacher trainer based right now in Parma, Italy. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But you've also done that, a little bit of that global circuit, right? So Malaysia, America, Italy, and you're really now aware of and fighting from what you've done there of that kind of social injustice. Exactly. And there's this label, which I know you hate with a passion. We've been involved in online discussions together, this label about the non-native speaker of any given language. And that is really what your talk is about here, how that pervades the industry and what we can do about it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you just to say to people that, yes, please put points in the text chat, use those thumbs up and cheers and all that kind of thing. But we have a Q&A box. So if you've got a question we want Meri to address at the end, make sure you put that in the Q&A box so we address all those clear points. So over to you, Meri. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you once again for having me, for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and to once again challenge, discriminatory practice in English language teaching, which is obviously my industry as well. So I'm going to, throughout my talk, be giving you some points to think about and also, kind of connect and have a more of a constructive conversation on what, native speakerism is and how biases are very much deeply rooted in this field of education. So I'm going to start my presentation, and I followed a bit of your talk in the panel that you had just now, and my talk, I feel, really touches upon a lot of these issues that you brought up, as well as certifications, qualifications, which is better, which is worse, which ones are recognized and whatnot. So I'm going to begin. And hopefully, you'll see my views on this, because it does take a lot of reflecting to get to this point in my career as well, to address some of these issues. And obviously, if I leave something out, please put it in the chat box. So without further ado, I wanted to actually ask you to type 1 or 2. If you are a native speaker, type 1 in the chat box. If you're a non-native speaker, type 2 in the chat box. And let's just start from there, because I'm very curious as to who our audience is today. While I ask you this question, what is native speakerism? You don't need to write it down in the chat. Just think about what is native speakerism, what do you know about it. You might want to just put some key catchphrases in the chat box there to see whether we have more or less the same idea before I give you a more detailed explanation as to what it is. So a disclaimer I have to say is that I am against any sort of dichotomy between native speakers and non-native speakers. It might seem like I'm in favor of non-native speaker teachers, but it's not the case. I'm in favor of all teachers. So it's an ideology, right? Native speakerism is an ideology, and it's a deeply rooted ideology in our field. And it privileges voices of Western English language teaching institutions. What do I mean by this? We kind of have all agreed that we're going to uplift those who come from Western institutions and, look at in a critical way towards, the global South, let's put it this way. And this has had its repercussions on the industry. So we use biases and stereotypes to classify people as superior or inferior based on their perceived belonging or lack of belonging to the native speaker group. So The key word here being perceived, because we really need to be careful with that, because a perception is not reality. Everyone has their own perceptions, right? So we have to educate ourselves to stop our biased, conclusions and assumptions we make of people in front of us, especially in the education field, because we should not allow this to happen, and we should use our critical thinking, and we should get to know the people in front of us before we make assumptions. And I hope the slide is... Sorry, yeah, there we go. I got a bit of a... So speakerhood, similarly to race, again, going from the perceived, notion, the notion of perception, is not a biological trait, but it's a social construct. It's a social constructed trait. And similarly to race, we should not let this lead our judgment when we're looking at, teachers, we're looking at the profession, we're seeing who is supposed to be in the classroom teaching our students. And we should not apply this dichotomy. Oh, am I going to, for learners, they should not be considering, oh, I need a native speaker teacher that can take me to XYZ level because just because I perceive the native speaker to be an excellent teacher, and not the same for the non-native speaker, right? So what does this really mean? Linguistically speaking, as in my disclaimer, there are no grounds to maintain the distinction between native and non-native speakers. I call myself the non-native speaker to challenge this dichotomy, because no one in their right mind in today's world would ever advertise themselves as being a non-native teacher. I hope you agree with me here on this, because I've never seen it be done. And I thought after some time of facing these challenges that I had to bring it up. I thought, hey, I need to work on this. I need to be able to say, hi, I'm Meri. I come from Armenia. I've lived in Armenia for the first 6 years of my life. My parents are Armenian, without feeling ashamed, without feeling that this was going to get me to lose working opportunities, or, seem as an unfit teacher to my students. So that's why I call myself the non-native speaker very openly now, because I just feel that I need to challenge that myself for me. And this has become then what you will see in a second. I'll tell you more about what happened. So if we know that this is a social construct, then I ask you this now. Why? Why are non-native speaker teachers facing these challenges? We see this all the time. We're only looking for native speaker candidates. I believe this is how David actually found me, with me actually contrasting this type of talk on social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We often get this, what's your nationality? I get phone calls from language schools who know me, and they say, listen, they're apologetic about it. Can I ask you, where are you from? What nationality are you? I don't mean it in a bad way. As long as you're not Italian, we think you can teach at our school, because our learners will see you as a foreigner. So actually this thing of being someone, it's very exotic, I guess, to learners to have teachers that come from diverse backgrounds and who are not the same nationality as they are. And when do we put a stop to this, right? So I'm going to address that in a second as well. So you already know I come from Armenia, but before the age of 13, I've lived in Moscow, Buenos Aires, Kuala Lumpur. I've lived in Bangkok, in San Diego, and at the age of 13, my family moved to Italy. I'm saying this not because you might be interested in my personal life story, but because it's good to know that the places that you have been to, or where you have traveled on holiday, and where you, visit your relatives, should not be part, in my opinion, of your CV, of your resume, because it doesn't say anything about the actual skill you have for speaking the languages that you do. If you look at this long list, you probably would think, she might speak Armenian. She's definitely Armenian. So she's born in Yerevan, that's the capital city. She speaks Armenian, is her native tongue. And I would object to that already, because I'd say, I'm actually Armenian. Yes, of course, I've lived there, I have not been educated in Armenian. So I am illiterate in what should be my native language. I can say that I'm a mother tongue speaker. That was the first language I spoke to my mom and my dad and my relatives. But up until this point, I can't carry a conversation in Armenian without reverting to using other languages that I've learned along the way. I've learned Russian through watching cartoons because they were dubbed in Russian at that time. Armenia was part of the Soviet Union. I lived in Buenos Aires. I used to speak Spanish. I've forgotten it until I picked it up again during my master's degree. I don't speak Malay, even though I lived in Malaysia. I don't speak Thai, even though I lived in Bangkok. And if I say to people, well, people might ask me, what languages did you speak in Kuala Lumpur and Bangkok? Well, I spoke in English. I learned English in Malaysia. I know Malaysia is not an inner circle country where people speak English. We know that in Malaysia, people speak English, but most people don't attribute or don't associate Malaysia with or see it as an English-speaking country. So by the time I was 13, I moved to Rome. And currently my family is in Lecce. It's in the very south of Italy. I moved to Parma to actually study communication studies. So teaching English was not even a fantasy of mine. I did not want to become a teacher. I was quite adamant at following that. But when I did go to university studying for my bachelor degree in communication studies, I also decided I'm going to help myself. I'm going to try to make ends meet and not depend on my family anymore. So I accepted a job as a shop assistant. I promise you it's going to be quite brief. This is not my life story, but just so that you can follow me and get to the point where I have reached today. So I got a phone call. I was at the time probably, I probably had 6 hours of English lessons with students, and they were like, I was trying to make ends meet, like I said, so I was helping them with homework. The age group would be about, 7 to 10-year-olds. Yeah. And I thought that was a good way to just say, I know English. I speak English. Would you like me to help your daughter or your son with their homework? And I did get some families, and I put a job ad. I just said, I'm available to give repetitions and tuition to this type of students. So language school found me through these ads, and they called me while I was working as a shop assistant, and which, by the way, I hated doing. And they said, would you like to be an English teacher over the phone, just speaking to me in English? And I was really like, this isn't happening. I mean, I do give, some lessons to kids, really, but I am not an English language teacher. And they said, we don't really care. Would you like to work for, multinational companies teaching English? So the non-native speaker was actually the beneficiary of native speaker privilege, because just by how I sounded, the perception of the person on the other line was, you can actually be a teacher for us. You can actually work for us. So, like I said, I didn't like the job I was at. I would have never probably accepted it if I didn't like the job I was currently doing. And so I said, I can give it a go. Now, at that stage, I had no idea that I was using a phrasal verb. And in fact, during my maybe first 3 lessons, a student taught me what a phrasal verb was. And I really loved the job. And for about 1.5 years, I was unqualified, unprepared, but receiving the same salary as my native speaker colleagues who actually had a qualification as well. Therefore, my global perspective here, I would say. So I thought, okay, I like this job. I would like to make this into a career. And so I sought formal training. I did my CELTA in civil, by the way. And I loved it even more. And I thought, hey, I'm going to study this very seriously now. I did an MA in language studies, and then I took my Delta. And my actual thoughts in all of this process, when I realized what native speakerism was, and I saw these job ads and I started to reflect on these things, I thought, wow, things won't change in ELT, so we might as well go with the flow, right? Because it seems that no matter how much I qualify myself, I'm getting the same, I'm being paid the same, I'm getting the same kind of job offers. No one is really considering the fact that I have done all this extra work. I did it just for, personal peace of mind, and no one ever asked me to get any type of qualification. I just thought I wanted to do a job well done. So naively, I went through my life thinking I'm going to get this next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. Slowly, this mentality kind of formed in my head. I thought I will never be as good as a native speaker or have the cultural background, because a lot of teachers were all about, talking about where they were from and, whether they were American or from the UK. They were very proud of their heritage and their cultural awareness of these things. They had been basically teaching their entire lives, or teachers their entire lives, even though we do know that you do need to actually acquire the skills to be a teacher, to be called that. Yes. And again, no judgment here. If you happen to be a native speaker working with no qualifications, I've been that person myself, apart from the fact that I was not a native speaker, but I was perceived as one. So this thing formed into my head again. I thought, okay, once I get XYZ qualification, there won't be any roadblocks. So I would, get this honorary privilege by showing people that, I was good enough and I was as close as they come to a native speaker model. And I thought, in Italy, unfortunately, the Delta Cambridge is not so renowned. Okay, it's not spoken about enough. People still think here that the CELTA is actually at a higher qualification level than the Delta. So going back to what we were talking about during the panel discussion, I would say before seeking out, and I saw some of the questions, what should I do, this or that, I would say take into consideration where you are now, who you want to work for, what associations you work for, what institutions, and ask them which qualification they value most. This is my 2 cents on it. But personally, I thought, as I had a Delta qualification already, but still to even be admitted to universities, that was not considered validating enough. So I had to sit proficiency exams as well. So during my life, I've done the IELTS and I've done the TIE exam with Gatehouse Awards. So I did get a C2 level across all skills to prove my worth. And yet I still got the same questions, and I still get the same questions today. What's your nationality? Are you a native speaker? Where are you really from? And you might say, I've had people say, this is not the reality where I am. And my institution actually recognizes this, and we have gone over this, and, so if everyone knows of these issues, why do we see, I'm going to go 2 slides ahead because let's do this step by step. Sorry, let me go again. I actually wanted to show you something beforehand, but I'll go step by step. Why are non-native English-speaking teachers given a hard time? If we all know this to be, it's common knowledge, it's critical thinking, you need to be a teacher in order to be a teacher, right? I mean, there's no need to be a genius here to get to this point. You can't teach something that you haven't studied to teach. No one accepts that. You don't become a doctor from experience for being a doctor. You first need the title, then you go into, the hospital that you need to work there. You're an apprentice, you learn it, but you're either studying for it or you have completed your studies. No one allows you in the room unless you have XYZ qualification or you're studying to be something. Not in our field, unfortunately. So I figured that this is why. So the ideology is being perpetuated. People are still looking for native speakers. People are still saying that native speakers are better. And so our learners are convinced of this. Auditory racism. So it's not enough to look the part or to have a certain nationality, but you can have the right nationality and still be judged on that because you are perceived as unintelligible simply because people are not familiar with your accent, even your native speaker accent. Native speakerism isn't just something that favors native speakers. It's a disadvantage to the entire teacher category Because if someone thinks, and a lot of teachers have written to me, they said, I come from XYZ country and the language, the ADOS or the director asked me to neutralize my accent and not speak in a certain way because my students are finding it hard. And this is very close to, I would say, racism. If it's not that, it's auditory racism, because we're now favoring certain sounds, certain accents over others. And I just don't understand how that's okay. You might say that the majority of the world speaks English, and so it's great to have a native speaker accent. I would disagree with that. I think that does very bad for any speaker who speaks English as a second, third, fourth language. I don't like to personally see that as like 1, 2, 3, because I believe that we can learn languages equally well, no matter the age, no matter. And some articles and academia actually favors my point of view more than the opposite view, that we are only good at the languages we study since we are children. But that's another thing. So I'm just touching on some topics, and I hope you're following along here and everything is clear. But please put any questions you have in the comments or in the Q&A. And finally, there is this kind of a fear that as a non-native teacher and speaker, you often have. You feel like an imposter because, like what I was feeling back when, you weren't going to be good enough and you couldn't see yourself as being good enough because, honestly, you were afraid to even say that you were a non-native speaker, you were originally from another country. Often, people would actually ask you not to mention your origins, and I'm talking in a teacher context. And you would have to kind of abide by these standards and say, I'm originally from Armenia, but really, I'm in Italy, I'm based, but I've lived in San Diego. Oh, but I lived in Malaysia, as though an experience you had as a 7-year-old was going to make up for your lack of experience, right? Or your lack of being born into the right context, or the right city, or the right nation, and whatnot, or holding the right passport. But we'll get there. So for those of you who might say this is not a thing, we don't see this, these are actually examples online that you can find. Southeast Asia is horrible at this because they keep, going for the imagery, the looks, the accent, everything. And their requirements are native English teacher and Cambly there, practice with native English speakers, Promoba, English with native speakers. We get programs, teacher programs aimed at native teachers. I mean, native speaker English trainer with reference to where exactly they are from. Because why not? People hide this behind preference. I prefer an American accent because I'm going to go to America. Okay, the variety of accents available in America to choose from are a multitude. Yeah, there is a crazy array of accents to choose from. Which one is it going to be? So if we're going to go down this road, then why don't we specifically say which city, town this person is actually from? And then people will be even more, they'll actually, talk about niche. They will hone even more inside there, what is specific to them, what they actually need. One might also think, are our students in the position to determine what they actually need, right? Let's think about that for a second. So let's go into a bit of documentation. The CFR descriptors have changed a long time ago. It was 2001 when we took out any sort of reference to native speaker like from our actual descriptors. So there is no kind of thing of, you should learn your C2 level if you're listening. It means that you can understand native speakers or speak at native speaker speed. It's like we don't know anyone who is a native speaker and who does very poorly at speaking, at confidence, at writing, and is really unintelligible. We all know these people do exist. However, our schools across the globe are offering them jobs in the disguise of come and we'll sort things out for you. We'll get you the visa. We'll get you the working permit. All you need to do is come from the right background. And Italy does that extremely well as well, because the Ministry of Education says that what is a native speaker? So to them, you're a native speaker if you have completed your secondary education in an English-speaking country, but not just any English-speaking country. So Malaysia wouldn't make the cut. Thailand wouldn't make the cut. No, it's the big 7 countries that you would actually need to have been born into or completed your secondary education in. And that's not even coming close to maybe them saying, we don't want that because, we were looking for someone blonde with blue eyes. I'm going to refer that because that's what a lot of people have been telling me about, Sometimes it's not about your nationality, it's how you look. And sometimes it's about how you sound as well. So if a language is not subject to ownership, so no one owns this language, it's a lingua franca, but is rather to be learned and used, the ownership of English bears global features. It is not the native speaker's monopoly that they can decide to keep or pass on to others. This is why, excuse me, I keep saying that this is not okay. And if you are benefiting from this privilege, do know that this is a privilege. And those who are not openly speaking about this are people who are afraid of losing their jobs, of being seen as experts when they are not. The only people who always pick a fight with whatever it is that I am saying are people who have not studied to become teachers. I have done my research on this. With every contrasting opinion, I have gone into the profile and seen that this person was not involved in education. Most people involved in education know that you are supposed to have certain criteria. Instead, native speaker privilege has made it that people are actually just getting all the benefits without even understanding that this is a privilege. So what's left? I currently work. I am paid quite well. I am under no kind of illusion to think that it's because of my qualifications. I think the reason I have a good job today is because of how I speak. And most people tell me, told me back then, find a decent job and get on with your life, Meri. This is a very hard thing to change, and it's never going to change probably because it benefits too many people. A bit like patriarchy, white supremacy, call it what you will. Okay, compare it to what I think I've given you enough clues and hints today to kind of connect it to something that you feel might speak to you. But what I have decided is, and you have to decide today whether you're going to fight this or are you going to flee? Are you going to escape from this and not ever think about it? And if you're in a position that this really triggers you, I suggest you don't fight for it. Until you do get certain help and understanding, because it's a lot of how you see yourself, your identity as an English language speaker, your identity as a language teacher. I don't think you can fight it because people are going to attack you if you start questioning this privilege. They're going to say bad things or criticize your typos and say you're not as good and they have more cultural awareness, yada, yada, yada. So you don't want to do that. But I have obviously taken the opposite approach. I'm fighting, and especially on Instagram, you can find me under the non-native speaker with underscores under each of those words, where every day I question this mentality. And I write posts like this. You can have a PhD in English literature, but if you haven't completed your secondary education in an English-speaking country, your English can't be considered better than that of a native speaker. And this is from experience. I did get a lot of love in the comments and, people who are actually behind it. I do get sometimes people who, send me some screenshots and say, this is what's happening. Could you please speak up? Could you please do this? And I do when I have the time. I don't get paid specifically to address everyone's issue, but when I can, I do. And I'm sad to see that people are so afraid at calling out these practices They are afraid of not being given a working opportunity. And so they're very quiet about it, the majority of that. So here is a question. What would your school do if a student, learner, or parent made a complaint about you not being a native speaker? Here goes. What if you are the one sort of discriminating? And apologies, but I see these things, they are public, so I'm going to refer to them. If you want to apply to work with EF, you can select one of these nationalities. Are you from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa? Ireland is a stretch because normally Ireland is not mentioned as one of the countries where you are preferred to be from. And then it's other nationality, but it's strange that we have those listed. And then we have things like no experience required to start. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, thank God for this, because I wouldn't have become a teacher today. Yeah, it's not all black and white. It's not. It's really not. So what I did to do something about it, I've interviewed people. I created the Native Speakerism Undone series since last year. And I've interviewed people who are both native and non-native speakers, and not just any people, but people who are actually working in the field, coming from all over the world. Canada, Poland, France, Argentina, Australia, Vietnam, everywhere. Like, I think I've covered a great deal. Yes, I haven't covered the entire world, but they were referring back to their experiences as well as world travelers. And so we recorded an episode on teacher discrimination in the classroom. We recorded an episode, it was live on LinkedIn, degree in language studies versus teacher training courses. And we've done one on non-native student teachers' own perceptions and preconceptions of RP and other accents of English. We've done a talk on dispelling myths of native speakerism amongst professionals. We've done one on mindset and challenges for showing up online as a non-native teacher. We've done one on the privilege of sounding native, and is there really a privilege? We've recorded an episode on how are our students affected by this. We have done an episode roasting racist ads as the ones that you saw and really analyzing why this came to be. We have tackled it from the legal perspective, what can be done to actually get that job that you cannot apply for because you're not a native speaker, and so there's a no entry sign. We have done things about, how are customers responsible for the high demand of native speaker teachers? Because a lot of people say, if my client wants a native speaker, that's what I'm going to give because that's where the money is at. I'm ending my sentence with a preposition deliberately. Why you don't want to be a native speaker? And addressing, finally, this was actually a school project that reached out to me from Burch University in Croatia and Siena University in Italy, addressing accentism in educational settings where students or university students actually spoke about what it means for them and how they, realized what was happening so that they could actually, construct a career or create a career for themselves in the language teaching business while knowing that this is actually going to be an issue in their lives. It's a very interesting talk that we had. So 12 interviews that can be actually purchased and watched at a very low cost. And if you're interested, please go to www.thenonnativeSpeaker.com/NSU, Native Speakerism Undone. You can find snippets of it also on YouTube if you're interested to see exactly what it is. But I thought it's a very important thing to look at if you want to start speaking up about it, because if you're not educated on the issues and on the matters, you're not going to do a good job at defending your rights as an English language teacher who is also a professional English speaker. I hope I didn't go over time.
No, we're absolutely fine for time. I keep, when you pause slightly, I'm wondering if you're checking the text chat, because we've had such great involvement there from people throughout. And as one of my colleagues in the room is saying, you're really exciting and inciting some people to comment, I think, on both sides of what might potentially be seen as a divide if people consider that they want to embrace that duality of native, non-native, which you provoked us to think about at the beginning, whether we're a 1 or 2, or I put a 3. I thought I'd cheat, because maybe we ought to be beyond that. And I think as where I sit, before we get into questions, we have got some really good questions. And Grace, if you put up your hand for a question, pop it in the text chat and we'll jump into it there. Before we get to those questions, I think, as you said, you and I have been looking at those forums where people keep asking for native teachers and so on. And in a company that doesn't put that front and forward, as you heard from one of our non-native teachers earlier, we struggle with what to call people as well, because people like that name. So do we say bilingual? Right now I'm in a room.
I say embrace it. Can I just interrupt? I say embrace it. Why? That's why I said, why don't make it into a normal thing? What if non-native speaker meant you're actually qualified? Because non-native speakers don't get access to teaching jobs without having qualifications. Mine was just a rare case where people thought I sounded, like a native speaker. I would ask where from. People don't have a real, concrete idea of what it is to sound native, because it just doesn't exist. It's a social construct.
Or just sounded very competent in English to embrace what some people are saying here in both the text chat and the questions. I think let's take Rosalind's question, for example. She said, but don't the students need to understand what the teacher's saying? Can we take that out of the non-native context, or is that an issue, do you think?
But why wouldn't they understand? If you're placing a teacher in a classroom, you're also teaching them about what it means to be exposed to one accent or the other. What is the only thing I can see, thinking forward and using my critical thinking, is when you put teachers who are qualified, but their qualifications aren't just as good. And when you were having the discussion with the panel, I was thinking, education and titles don't mean quite as much anymore, do they? If you can be a teacher in a classroom with a 4-week course, online course, and I'm not saying that they are bad, because I've been the person to go for this formation trainings and everything, and I really enjoy them, and I thought they were valuable. But it's also like it is an industry. So people are handing out these certificates. Tutors are really helping, and non-native and native speakers just get those qualifications. And so then it falls on to the actual language schools and associations to see if the teacher is actually fit. But then how are they going to value whether someone is fit or not? Are they going to ask them what nationality they are? Are they going to give them, ask them to do a free training to see if they are fit or not? I mean, these are just considerations, but considering that there is no qualification that kind of guarantees or gives you a warranty of you having a quality or qualified teacher in front of you, And what I want to say, again, in favor of non-native speaker teachers, many of them have actual degrees and master's degrees and PhDs. They have studied for 5-7 years. They have got another qualification on top of that. They've got a CELTA on top of that. They've got a Delta on top of that. They've got a C2 across all skills, and still they don't get all the love and respect that they deserve because they don't look the part or they might not sound the part. We are comparing 4 weeks to a lifetime of work. Let's think about that.
So to come into that, I think a lot of people kind of embrace that and want to ally with that. There's people with my own kind of white male privilege who are doing very well, but want to ally with and want to. So, I mean, a couple of the questions here we have, an anonymous question. What's your best experience of somebody attempting to defeat that systematic bias? I mean, you showed us some very poor examples, for example, of job ads. Have you seen good job ads or, good leadership or policies that you would like to
Yes, I have.
talk about?
It's very easy. It doesn't include the words native speakers only. And it doesn't include no experience is required. We all have to start somewhere. But if you're saying nothing is required, I don't think that that's okay. A positive thing would be you're looking for English language teachers who are qualified to teach. Just asking for qualifications would be already a very good practice that we don't see as often. I've seen some people try to say C2, a C2 level speakers, right? But then here in Italy, native speakers can self-assess. As a non-native speaker, I've had to pay for a certificate, sit a proficiency exam twice to get a C2 across all skills to show that I am proficient after having, been awarded qualifications for being a teacher. I've done my Delta and then had to sit a proficiency, paying more to the awarding bodies to actually determine the fact that I'm apt to teach and I have a specific proficiency level. I think that's just preposterous. That's just uncalled for. And, I'm happy to keep the industry alive, but only if the industry is going to serve people like me in the future.
I'm going to have to move us to wrapping up there. I think there's a couple of other people saying, how can people be allies? If you've got a short 1 or 2 sentence in that, how can teachers in the profession do anything? Anything quick you want to say to wrap up on that? Do you have another session to start? So you've maximum 30 seconds.
Very, very quickly. You can call it out on any kind of job ad that you see. Currently, there are about 5 or 6 of us on LinkedIn who are connected and we're networking, who are just calling these things out and saying, this is not okay, this is a discriminatory job ad. And what you could do, even if you are a native speaker and benefiting from this, is not apply for a job and say that. You call them back or you write to them. I know it feels hard to renounce to a job, but this is ultimately going to benefit you, because I've had native speaker teachers reach out to me saying, I don't like the fact that no one is looking at my qualifications. They are just hiring me based on my passport. And that hurts, doesn't it? When you have actually put in the effort and invested the money and you're still getting hired because you're just sound and look the part, it's kind of harmful to you too. So do something about it, right? It doesn't have to be a presentation like mine was. It was just like 2 words. This is not okay. Or, keep it.
Thank you very much. I'd love to hear you talk more about this. I love your passion and your engagement there, and clearly the audience is quite engaged with this too. We have got another session about to start with John, so I do want to move to a close. But again, I really like that final closing point you made there. Call it out, because we all want the profession to be more professional, right? It helps us all if really teachers are hired on merit. Who is a great teacher? Are they paid more? Is there a career path? All these things, rather than this simple prejudice, which Meri has been very ably fighting against. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for your contributions today in the text chat and so on. And I hope to see you in the following session. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.